to mute your own line, so you don't have a mute on your local phone when we're, until we get to your portion of the presentation. You can use *6 for the teleconference. Can people in the webinar just double check, maybe mention in the chat box if you're able to hear us speaking now, if the audio is connected?
Michael, I missed that part. Do you want us to mute our phones as well till we speak?
Yes, if there's any background noise, that might be a good idea.
Okay. Then how will I know what's happening? Like just from the slide?
Well, you'll be able.
So you'd be able to hear, just not speak. That's right. If you put it on mute, yes.
Got it. Yes.
Good. It sounds like people on the webinar can hear us. Hi, Jane.
Hello.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you. Please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat box if you'd like. We have people from all across North America on the webinar today. Tremendous background, diversity of voices, so that's always a fun part for me, at least. My name is Mike Tuohy with the Canadian Community Economic Development Network, and it's always fun to see so many people from across North America. Dagmar, would you like to say hello?
Great. Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Marta Timmer, and I am the Director of Strategic Initiatives and the co-founder of the nonprofit One Earth. I'm pleased to be hosting the session today, and as Mike just mentioned, if you haven't done so already, please feel free to introduce yourself and where you're from in the chat box at the bottom right of your screen. I already see some wonderful responses going up. We have all of our speakers here, of course, and a great diversity of participants signed up from across the country and internationally, and from the U.S. and Canada.
Jonathan Rosenthal. Sorry, we might just wait a second for a few more people to arrive, and we can say hello to folks joining the call. It's wonderful to have Jonathan from the New Economy Coalition joining us, and I believe he might have another event to get to very shortly, so it's wonderful that you're able to join us for the start. As I said, we have about, I can see we're close to 50 people on the webinar now. We had nearly 100 registered for the session from the United States and Canada, mostly Canadians, but a good chunk of folks throughout the U.S. as well, from as far away as James Bay, the First Nations Health and Social Services Commission, through down to Berkeley, California, and now John out in Boston, and Phil even on PEI. It's wonderful to see you here, Phil. So welcome, everyone.
Great.
All right,
yes, even PEI. That's right. Great. And there's Liz Suarez. So we'll give it just another moment for the last people to come on, and then we'll start with a few technical notes, and then begin the session. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. So just a couple of technical notes before we get started. How well your computer follows the audio and presentations largely depends on the speed and the quality of your internet connection. If you're finding that the audio or the video are choppy or delayed, it may help to close other applications that are connected to the internet, such as Skype or Instant Messenger or email software, other pages on your web browser. The way that we're going to do the questions is that everyone should feel free to ask questions in the chat box in the bottom right of the screen at any time, even during the interviews, and we'll gather those questions and respond to them during the question period. We're going to be recording today's session, and it'll be posted afterwards on One Earth, on the CEDNet website, and on Cities for People's website as a resource for others who couldn't be here today. You can join the live tweet as well at #NewEconomies, as well as hashtag New Economy Week. So I'll type in hashtag New Economy Week here as well. So feel free to tweet to both of those. Today's session, Voices of New Economies, Opportunity for All, is brought to you by One Earth, the Canadian Community Economic Development Network, and Cities for People. One Earth is a nonprofit think and do tank that's based in Vancouver. And our mission is to transform production and consumption patterns locally, nationally, and internationally to be sustainable, healthy, and just within the limits of living systems. The Canadian CED Network is a national association of several hundred community organizations and individuals working to create local economic opportunities that support an inclusive and sustainable economy. And here you can see a few of their members' logos. We have Mike Tuohy here from CEDNet and others. I'll be speaking shortly. And here you can see an image of the new website member map. And you can find members close to you on the map located at the web address that's listed at the bottom of this screen. Cities for People is an initiative that aims to empower change and help foster the multi-level transformation and ideological shift that's required to help cities embrace the needs of their populations and come up with ways to meet them. Cities for People was an initiative of the J.W. McConnell Family Foundation. And here, excuse me. And so we'd like to thank the J.W. McConnell Family Foundation for their support of the Voices of New Economies series and making this project possible. If you like the session today, you can get in touch with any of these organizations to find out more and to get involved. So allow me to welcome you again, and there you can see a photo of me. Today's webinar will start with a brief introduction by Michael Tuohy and Vanessa Timmer, and then we have a fabulous lineup of speakers from the Voices of New Economies compilation, and they share their thoughts on strategies to scale their new economy innovation towards good work and opportunity for all, which is the theme of today for the New Economy Week. A special thanks to the speakers, as well as other Voices contributors who are joining us online today, including Jane Zhang, who's on the call and was one of the editors of the report. In the second part of the webinar, I will ask the questions that you've posted in the chat box. And once again, you should feel free to post your questions, comments, and any other information you'd like to share in the chat box at any time. This week is New Economy Week, and there will be amazing content on this theme all week, including through the New Economy Coalition's media partner, Yes Magazine. Today's session will focus on how we can scale promising innovations towards larger systemic change. And it's my pleasure to invite Michael Tuohy to share a few thoughts about the new economy and opportunities for all from the perspective of the Canadian CED Network. In 3 minutes, tell us about Voices and your own thoughts on sharing the movement towards new economies.
Thanks, Dagmar. It's wonderful to have so many people part of the discussion today to kick off New Economy Week. Obviously, here in Canada over the last few weeks, the feeling that things are changing has really surfaced, I think quite palpably for people. Because as our Prime Minister recently said, our new Prime Minister, it's 2015, right? A gender-balanced and diverse cabinet shouldn't be news, but it is, and we have some catching up to do in a few different areas. The economy, of course, is one of them. 20th century thinking was that the economy was a separate thing, that we could focus on that and that externalities would either be trickled down on or take care of themselves. But 50 years ago, after working with people who were continually excluded and left behind, left out of economic growth, a social innovation called community economic development said no, the economy and the community are connected, they need to be developed together in an integrated way. So I think it's that understanding of connectedness that's gradually permeating through what we call our civilization and the thinking. Today, it's obvious that the economy is connected to the environment. Public health specialists and epidemiologists know that your health is affected by your income, and businesses are essential to building communities. Taking action to shift the economy to a local level, a community level, as part of a move to re-embed our values in the economy is a growing trend. We see it in consumer choices for healthy local food, the creation of new co-ops and social enterprises, and the move towards community investment and social purchasing opportunities, to name just a few. So from my perspective as part of a national network here in Canada, I can see how from coast to coast to coast, in urban neighborhoods to remote hamlets, all over the place, Canadians are building community economies that are more democratic and contribute to positive local economic, social, and environmental impacts. And young people especially are looking for alternatives. More than ever, graduates want jobs that have a social purpose. They're even reporting this as a bigger motivation when looking for a job than a starting salary. Research by Demos in the U.S. has found that the next generation of university applicants are even more engaged in social issues than any before them and are driven to take action on causes they care about during their education. I've even seen research from the UK showing that the workforce of the social economy is growing faster than the for-profit sector. So in the face of climate change, growing inequality, and limits to old-style economic growth, I'm inspired every day by the members of CEDNet who are making a difference. And as a national network, we believe that we're stronger together. So we do all sorts of things to strengthen connections among our members and support them in their work, and offer a community of people who are excited about ideas that can transform society and build an economy where people and the planet matter. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Mike. Now it's my pleasure to invite Vanessa Timmer, the Executive Director of One Earth, to share a few thoughts about the new economy and opportunities for all from the perspective of One Earth.
Thank you, Deborah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. So new economies, it's such a powerful idea, and it's been great working with CEDNet and New Economy Coalition and others on this. And we really wanted to explore how we can move beyond our current unsustainable, unjust economic system to enable transformation. And in order to do that, how do we define this idea of new economies? Well, with the Voices of the New Economy series, we really explored the edges and contours of the concept. And, we have this goal of kind of having a greater impact on the well-being of people, communities, and the earth. So our contributors are shedding light within the series on not only what this concept is, but also about scale. So how do we scale out and spread useful innovations, the new economy's activities that work and that have promise? And we do that by replicating them, copying them across Canada and the United States, and also adapting these initiatives to new contexts and opportunities. So the series really highlights some of those things that we can scale out. But equally important to this, we really wanted to highlight some of the key principles, key elements behind new economies and disseminate those principles. And Jane Zhang, who's on the phone, the editor, distilled 3 key elements that were common amongst a lot of the contributions to the series. The first is social inclusivity, the active engagement of diverse groups. The second thing that came up within the New Economy series is community interdependence, how important it is to build relationships with our fellow human beings. And the final key element is planetary sustainability, the conscious accounting for natural limits when we design our economy. And these principles can be applied within these activities and initiatives, but also they can lead us to scale up our activities to change things from this new perspective at the political and cultural level. And so ultimately, I say culture because the economy is based on our values. And by exploring what we value, we can start to see how we can build a society and economy that's more supportive of these issues or these ideas. And the final thing I want to say is that there's 3 things that I think are really important around the new economy space. The first is that we continue to take a long-term perspective into account, that we track our progress. Are we increasing and maintaining the things we want, such as community resilience, the things we don't want, such as inequality, waste, or toxins. And finally, it really matters who's at the table in shaping the alternatives that we design to our current economic challenges. the reality is that those who have vested interests in maintaining our dysfunctional aspects of the economy are not well placed to explore other options. It's those who are the most vulnerable and marginalized in our society that hold critical perspectives and capacities that open up possibilities so we can create just equitable and restorative economies. So I look forward to hearing from the contributors who are on the call today, and really wanted to note that these principles and ideas are not just about defining the economy, but scaling out the activities and scaling up to change the context, such as the political and the value or cultural context that we operate within. Thank you so much, Dagmar.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. She says it's a pleasure to hear these two context pieces and now to also hear from the Voices of New Economy contributors. The report itself features many different perspectives from across the whole spectrum of new economies understandings. And so we're going to hear from a few of them today, and each presenter has 3 minutes. So we'll start with Voices of New Economy contributor Marianne Jerzniak, who's the Governance Liaison Manager with Affinity Credit Union in Saskatoon. Thank you so much, Marianne.
Thank you, everyone, and thanks for having me today. When asked how I envision a new economy, the piece that really stuck out the most prominently for me is inclusion. A new economy where we're putting people before we're putting profit. To me, the goal isn't to get as big as we can, as fast as we can, but rather that we're progressing forward without leaving anyone behind, and that our decisions are made based on mutual benefit with all stakeholders being considered, including our environment. So how do we achieve this? I believe a key component really is rooted in democratic self-governance. Grassroots democratic governance doesn't mean we have to sacrifice innovation and progress. In fact, ensuring that all stakeholders have a voice at the table means we truly understand those needs of those who are impacted. So every day, people get endless opportunities to shape the economy that they want to live in. We live in a diverse world, especially in North America, where there are many alternative options for a consumer. So I personally have options to bank with a credit union. I can purchase my groceries locally and from a co-op, and I can share resources such as transportation through a car share co-op. So the difference with all of that is I actually have the opportunity to have a say in these organizations that shape our economy, and most importantly, I can hold them accountable. So my hopeful sign of a growing movement is simple. It's youth. When I look at the youth engagement in the recent federal election, I saw that our next generation of leaders realized the power of their voice and had cared about what they had to say. We saw some progress this year, including barriers being addressed with things like advanced polling stations set up on campuses, which did help to ensure that our youth voice was heard. Why does youth matter? To me, it really is the thing to remember is whether we have a democracy within a government or a local co-op, we're really only as good as our next generation. To scale towards opportunity for all, I do really believe we need to invest in youth, which is asking, encouraging, and insisting them to be at the table with their voice. So I've been involved in the past with the Cooperators and the Natural Steps Impact Sustainability Leadership Program over the last 5 years. And these programs focus on growing and equipping our next generation of leaders from across Canada and from across diverse sectors of interest and cultural backgrounds, and equipping them with sustainability tools and connections. When I see the growing movement of these youth who share values in investing in an inclusive economy and caring not so much about how much money they're making and the size of their wallet, but rather the health of their community, it really does give me hope. So I just spent the last weekend with over 50 participants from across our prairie provinces talking about sustainability issues and how we can fix some gaps in our current economy. I was blown away by the amount of innovation, collaboration, and determination that was in the room with those students. So really, I don't know if there is a grand plan or a silver bullet to ensure our youth are engaged, but I do know from experience that it really can start with a simple conversation. So I encourage everyone, especially if you're in a position with an organization, to ensure you're finding ways to ask and listen to your youth, whether that's through mentorship or really just finding a way to ensure that their voice is being heard at that table. And as for our youth, I not only encourage, but I ask and insist that you find a way to make your voice heard and to find your way to those tables, because your voices really do matter. So that is my thoughts on the new economy and inclusion for all, especially youth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marianne. As you say, you point to a really important group that definitely needs to be involved in these discussions around new economies. Thank you. Now we have Sean Joby, who is Associate Professor at the University of Waterloo School of Environment, Enterprise, and Development. He will also share a hopeful sign of a growing movement and then look at how to scale towards good work and opportunity for all within the field that he's working in. Thank you.
Great, thank you. It was actually quite nice to have Marianne start us off with that piece about having those local, more democratic forms of governance and engagement, because that's also where I see the real next step in how we transform the economy we're looking at, is a real revival of mutual aid systems, the ways that we can support each other and invest in each other at a local and at a global level. Although we have very, really unparalleled opportunities for individual expression and creativity, like we've seen nowhere else in human history, because we have this information technology that allows us to compute things faster and transmit ideas worldwide in a virtually frictionless manner. That is contingent upon us still finding real ways to invest in real people, to invest in their training, to invest in their personal security, to keep their human and health capital sustained. And what I believe we are in danger of drifting into is a hyper-competitive, unregulated, or under-regulated economy that really looks a lot more like the 19th century than I think we want the 21st century to look like, with growing inequality, increased precarity, and environmental uncertainty. And it really is in the revival of mutual aid ideas, a rebirth and a modernization of cooperative and craft union and credit union movements that I believe we're going to be able to find those ways to invest in ourselves and in each other. And to me, where the real catalytic element here is that we need to find ways of actually financing those mutual aid developments. And I believe we are seeing some really interesting growth in the areas of online crowdfunding and also sort of online-enabled crowd sharing economy platforms that I think allow us to create the real physical and human capital, the real infrastructure that we need moving forward. Because it's ultimately what we invest in today, what we feel is important enough for us to build with some sense of permanence, that shapes what our tomorrow ends up looking like.
Thank you so much, Sean, for pointing to the importance of financing what we believe in and finding ways to make that real in the world through the investments that we make. Very appreciated. I just wanted to remind you that you're welcome to add questions and comments in the chat box as you hear them. We're going to be taking those on for the second half of the panel, of the webinar. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Liz Suarez, who's the Executive Director of FEM International and Co-Director of Ethic BGC. Liz.
Yes, hello everyone. Well, today I'm going to be talking a little bit about women and the global South. Well, FEM International is an organization that empowers women to be active and to become real actors in society and abroad. And we work in Montreal, but we also in Colombia, in Ecuador, in Peru, and in Asia. We believe that it is very important to work along equality to be able to reach the new heights, to reach really a society that is healthy. Up to date, there is no one country in the world that has truly achieved gender equality. And inequality is one of the biggest barriers to poverty reduction globally and locally. So creating equal opportunities for women everywhere is critical. Even those countries that pride themselves on gender equality have a long way to go in terms of female empowerment and the resulting ability to tackle poverty. Women in general price differently than men, and maybe it's because women often have different sense of interdependence, and is visible in their enterprise as well. We want to have societies in which women play a more important role, and that they play a more important role in their communities and business, and that the relationship is shifted really not into we are helping them, but it's more that let them take care of the decision-making process, both locally and abroad. Also elements that we want to bring across that we think is important to bring the movement forward is the international works a lot into international cooperation, and self-determination becomes a very important element in this process. Developing nations have been following the path of developed nations, replicating the development model, a path that is clearly not working. And they are now starting to frame things in their own perspective and context. And so this self-determination also is very important in terms of how collaborations happen among women groups and women-led enterprises, both locally and abroad. We're going to be moving into looking into the circular economy as well. Circular economy is for us another element that is very important is in the new economies is the circular economy is the extraction of resources, where the extraction of resources is reduced and the waste is reduced. And for us, the principle of circular economy are those based on a closed loop production where there is zero waste and input, and then we're trying to create the circle all over. And we believe that circular economy, it's also a way to move forward possibilities for societies and communities where women play a very important role, since it is for them a possibility to manage also their resources. So that's really what I wanted to with us today was just about bringing the importance of the woman movement, the importance of self-determination, and the importance of women playing an important role, not as of information, but more as a change makers and active role models for both local communities and communities internationally.
Thank you so much, Liz, also for bringing our focus to the international, because so many of our supply chains really do link globally, so thank you so much. And you've also put our focus on women and their enterprises and the role that international financing plays in all of this. Another tag that I noted was the focus on closed-loop production, which is going to be key in terms of new economies. Thank you. My pleasure to introduce you to Pallavi Roy, who is the researcher at the Center for Urban Energy at Ryerson University, and she puts her focus around the energy sector and new economies. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. This is the new economies topic, as everyone else has talked about, is about social inclusivity, community interdependence, and mostly importantly to me, about planetary sustainability and having a biocentric view to designing our future systems. I focus on energy because it's an important resource for economic development and something that countries are constantly looking for, the next big source of energy. And it's especially important as we continue to grow and with the rise of megacities, and especially those in developing nations. So there needs to be a commitment to meet this demand in a sustainable way, which also creates strong, resilient communities. And there's a huge opportunity because traditionally energy systems have used a top-down approach decentralized production facility, transmission over long distances, and end-of-life consumers. However, it is these consumers who no longer need to be become consumers, but they can become producers as well, and as a new term, they could be prosumers. As Asimoglu and Robinson said in their book, Why Nations Fail, that inclusiveness of economic and political institutions is what determines economic prosperity over a long time. The energy sector in Canada definitely needs to adopt a more inclusive policy towards citizen participation, but not only in a consultation form, but also actively participating and owning community energy projects and managing them. Research shows that the effect of NIMBYism, especially to wind projects, as well decreases when community members are involved in profit sharing or the management of projects. And it also leads to a more sustainable system in the longer run. And energy projects have different systems of the sharing and ownership that have been used in other places in the world. Specific examples come from the Scandinavian countries, UK, Scotland, and also it's currently growing in Ontario. It is important to understand and pursue the best practices most suitable for the Canadian energy landscape. And that is what my research focuses on how to better support public participation in community projects from a policy and regulatory perspective, so that municipalities, the energy boards, utilities, as well as citizen groups are all involved in creating our next systems of future for providing energy in a more sustainable manner, and basically converting everybody from having just one role and participating into the whole. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pallavi, for pointing us to the importance of citizen participation in sectors which have traditionally been so much more centralized, and looking at the kind of sharing and ownership models that might emerge and that are already, the seeds already exist, that there are already those models out there that we can look to for decentralized energy.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel that's where the future is heading, and we need to appreciate how others can contribute into it and open the avenues.
Yes, thank you very much. Just to follow up, because you still have a little bit of time, is there something that you're doing at the Center for Urban Energy as well, specifically, some research? You mentioned some of the research.
Yeah, at the Center of Energy, we're specifically looking right now on how to increase participation in not just community energy, but in energy in general from the public, so more citizen participation in energy policy development from all levels and from a regional perspective as well as a local perspective, and I'm specifically focusing on ownership as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to turn to Victoria Wee, who's a computer science student at Stanford University, and she's going to speak to us as well about what she sees as hopeful from her perspective. Thank you, Victoria.
Thanks,
and actually, Victoria, just before you begin, I wanted to say thank you so much. I'm seeing a lot of questions emerging in the chat box, so just a reminder that you can continue to do that.
Thanks, Dagmar. So yeah, I'll be speaking on inclusion and engagement, and particularly that at the decision-making level. So I want to echo Marianne's comments earlier, and also really talk about why younger people are an important demographic to bring into that conversation, and how we can really do this through multi-generational cooperation. And I'm also speaking as a younger person. I just turned 22 last month, and I began to actively follow the state of our national and international policies on sustainable development 3 years ago. And that's when I took a gap year after high school and began to work with an initiative called We Canada. And We Canada aimed to put pressure on Canadian governments to take on a courageous position at the UN Conference on Sustainable Development in 2012. And that's when I really learned about the mechanisms by which we as citizens are able to participate and engage with our decision makers. And that's when I realized also that that is really our only way to shape the future that we want at a policy level. So domestically, we need to look to our levels of government, and internationally, we have to examine bodies such as the United Nations and really look at how we're able to participate actively and sit at that table. And like Michael said at the beginning of the call, I too am really excited by the potential that we have with our new Canadian government. I think it's a great sign that Prime Minister Trudeau recently invited the federal opposition leaders and provincial premiers to join his delegation at the Paris COP conference later this month. And so this was, as many of you might know, like a standard practice in the past to invite opposition leaders and provincial leaders to join the official Canadian delegation at international conferences such as this one. But this mechanism is an example of one that was lost over the past decade. And it's great that we're back in action. And I think that one thing that we need to look at when we look at scaling towards new economies is to see whether we really take to heart this idea of the principle of non-regression. And this principle of non-regression is an international law principle that requires that norms adopted by states cannot be changed if that means that we're infringing or moving backward on collective and individual rights. So what does this mean? It means that we have a watchdog's eye on participation. Are our decision makers polling citizen opinions? Are we being consulted on how we want to be represented and how we want action to be taken nationally and internationally? And does that mean that we're able to speak freely, and who is being allowed to speak at the table? And I just want to wrap up by also speaking about what Marianne did as well, and that is empowering the next generation. And at that very practical level, it means that we need to look at our education system. And as someone that just went through the primary, secondary levels of education, it means looking at the content our education delivers. And just having gone through that system, I know how important that is to shaping my beliefs and my value systems. And those two are very important in really shaping the future that we want across the country. So does our education system deliver up-to-date, impactful knowledge about the current state of our country, our global relationships, our priorities, our values? And I think the key to scaling towards the new economies is really preparing and training this younger generation of people. And we can have a lot of fun with this. We can creatively open up opportunities for younger people to learn experientially and get a really resilient sense of our place in this country and at a global level.
Thank you very much, Victoria, and for bringing us back to that question of how we actually equip the leaders of today who are younger to be active in shaping new economies. Also, I note the principle of non-regression and the importance of really looking at how our collective and individual rights are held up at the national, international, and local levels. And how consultations might play a big role in making sure that from a local level upwards that those that we're actually involved in shaping the world that we live in. Thank you, Victoria. Now we have Nabil Ahmed, who is Network Coordinator of Social Enterprise Toronto, and he'll be speaking with us about what he sees as hopeful signs in terms of scaling new economies. Thank you, Nabil.
Thanks, Dagmar.
And I just a note, Nabil, if everyone can speak slowly as well, just to make sure that everyone catches.
Yes, I saw the comment about static.
Perfect.
So meet Miguel, Paul, Jason, and Mark Soberano. This is the Building Up team. They are a social enterprise, started a few months ago. They provide training and employment to people who face barriers to employment. And what's more, they do it by building plumbing retrofits that save water and energy, reduce bills, and they focus on the affordable housing stock in Toronto. So they're working on a number of different initiatives that are making the world a better place. And in my opinion, this is an example of organizations that are really taking us towards a new economy. And by the way, I should note there that you'll see the ramp is for the Stopgap Foundation, which is ramps for people who are using wheelchairs, and they work to address barriers in the built environment. And what does this really have to do with freedom? This is the topic that I covered in the publication. I think this is about freedom of mobility. We think about that, and freedom to do what you want to do, freedom to build businesses in the way that you want the world to exist. We always talk about freedom, and we've seen it abused, for the purpose of war, but we don't really live in a world where people have the freedom to do what they would like to do and enjoy it in its different manifestations. And in particular, the free market is not really free. It dictates a certain way of doing business. So for example, if you're making something for the market, you're incentivized to use the cheapest, lowest quality materials available, unless, of course, you're catering to a higher income group that demands certain quality. Another example, by the way, that we've seen of freedom of mobility is in the migrants. So this is truly an issue that we see on a regular basis. And I do take an internationalist lens towards this sense of, why do we need to move the new economy forward? Because under globalization, we've really embraced the benefits of working across borders, but we've also seemed to have externalized the costs. And that's something that concerns me. From the comfort of North America, we might not realize how many bonded laborers there still are in the world. How many literal slaves we still have. Slavery is still not over. It's around us in many different ways. So how can we provide more freedom? How do we scale towards good work? I want to push to you to think about social procurement and the freedom to work hard, the freedom to buy from businesses that are doing good work. Social procurement is an initiative that says, and this is something that is now common across the world, organizations are choosing to purchase from social enterprises. For example, your printing press or your catering, or as you're working to expand your operations, who do you choose to work with? And this is something you can do as an individual, but it's also something that you can do as a business, as a government. And we've seen some really promising steps in that direction.
Thank you very much, Nabil. And the stark reminder that often when we think about the economy, I think for many of us here, we're broader on that, but often we may not be thinking about the impacts that are being held by our current consumption and production patterns in different parts of the world. So thank you for bringing that to the front, Nabil. Now we have Alexa Patoulis, who is the Managing Director of Open Media. And thank you so much, Alexa. That's our last contributor that will be speaking. And after this, we'll turn to many of the questions that you've been posing. So do continue to do that.
Great, thanks. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. So excited to be here and to be kind of wrapping this up, because it's interesting we don't always make the connection between the issues of social inclusivity and building more connected, interdependent communities and planetary sustainability when we think of a free and open internet. So I just have 3 quick points. The first being why an open internet is critical to new economies. The second being how municipal broadband infrastructure is an interesting path forward to addressing Canada's digital deficit and digital divide. And third is how these digital tools can be used for increasingly participatory and community-led processes, conditions which move us all towards good work and opportunity for all. So the first point, open media really starts from a place of believing that a free and open internet is a universal human right, and that it holds the potential to build a more collaborative and democratic world. I love a quote from researcher McChesney, who talked about how regardless of what a progressive group's first issue of importance is, its second issue has to be ensuring open media and communication systems. On the next slide here, I'll try to I've shared a few quotes that came in from a community survey that we put out to our supporters, telling us about why they care about the open internet. Essentially, at Open Media, what we do is use the internet to save the internet by educating and engaging citizens in digital rights issues of free expression, privacy, and access.
The second point is to just illustrate one of our key projects in Canada that we're really excited about coming this year. Will be focused on supporting and promoting the development of municipal broadband. Now, what I mean when I say municipal broadband is basically city-wide internet access through community-based networks known as municipal broadband, typically operated by local governments, public utilities, cooperatives, nonprofits, or public-private partnerships. We really take the view that the infrastructure used to power the internet should not be left to private enterprise alone, just like public roadways or water treatment infrastructure. Municipal broadband really promotes universal internet access, particularly in low-income or rural communities that are underserved or passed over as insufficiently profitable by private internet providers. One exciting example is from Olds, Alberta, which became Canada's first gigabit town after big carriers refused to expand services. They now launched a municipal internet utility called ONET, which offers its 8,600 rural residents internet that is symmetrical and unlimited. Great example. Finally, my third point being that some of the most exciting work we do at Open Media, many of you might know us as being well known for mass mobilization when we're really trying to get the word out to stop something bad or sign this petition now. Someone's hair's on fire, we got to fight. But more important work that we do behind the scenes is experimenting wildly with using digital tools and demonstrating what is possible and how the internet can be used for participatory and community-led processes. For this last election, we had the culmination of several years' work where we were able to publish and promote three different crowdsourced, forward-thinking policy proposal reports that we call Our Digital Future. And I'll just switch to the next slide here, which you can check out at ourdigitalfuture.ca. But essentially, we engaged hundreds of thousands of Canadians and other international citizens around not only fighting what we don't like, but co-creating a vision for what digital rights and what the critical tool of the internet looks like for the future. So I think I'm over time. I will stop and pass it over to questions. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Alexa, and actually pointing us to some of the specific initiatives that you've been engaged in is a wonderful segue to the question period. We've been taking a look at all of the different questions, and there are many exciting threads to pull on here for the next 20 or 15 minutes that we have together. Let me say, though, that we will be posting and sending an email to you with the web links to the organizations that were mentioned and that were here today. As well, you'll see a much broader array even of contributors within the Voices series itself. So there were 29 contributors from many different organizations and institutions that participated in the Voices series and shared their thoughts around rethinking our fundamentals, healthy ecosystems and happy communities, building an inclusive economy, tools and policies to get there, and new economies at work. So I do point you to that as well. What we'll be doing is starting with one of the questions around cooperatives, where there was quite a lot of interest in thinking about cooperatives and how they might serve in terms of best practices. So there were three questions that related to that, and I will actually start by putting that through to Marianne, then Nabil and Liz. Just for short comments, short responses to any elements of this. So John wrote, I'd be curious to hear someone's experience as a worker owner in a cooperative. Would it be recommended to work in a cooperative before starting a new one? How can one find opportunities to work under a cooperative? Are there any best practices or replicable models that have been successful? If so, what are the examples? And what have been some of the reasons why many co-ops have failed and have not scaled in the way that was planned? Would like to understand why the generational transfer of cooperative wealth has experienced challenges. So am I right to assume that, Marianne, you might have some comments in relation to that?
Yeah, you bet.
Great. So just a short response would be wonderful to those elements.
You bet. And so I'm actually going to talk to one about about co-ops failing. So a co-op, just like any other business, of course, is a business model. And so in terms of starting a new one, I would say would face the same challenges of ensuring that there is a need that needs to be addressed, and that there are members who are willing to be a part of the co-op, similar as if consumers are looking to be a part of a business and there is a need there. But however, the stats have shown that cooperatives overall have a higher rate of survival than private businesses over, if you look at 5 years and 10 years down the road. So I would say that a co-op model, to be explored in the right context, can be a very successful option. And in terms of the generational transfer of cooperative wealth experiencing challenges, I would say a lot of that, again, is we do have a lack of education and awareness around cooperatives, and especially in a place like North America where we don't, I guess, say face the immediate sometimes the immediate challenges are not as prevalent as in other countries. People, I don't think, realize the impact that cooperatives have over, say, an investment-owned firm. So I think education and awareness are key to those.
Thank you very much, Marianne. Would Liz or Nabil or someone else like to jump in with a comment as well around cooperatives, which is a very interesting and promising business structure?
Yes, I could contribute a little bit there. I do think that it helps a lot. In ETIC, actually, it's a collective model, and we have 50 designers or artisans from 19 nationalities. And I will say that what works, the collaborative system works very well when, especially when we're dealing with different nationalities, it becomes really rich. We've implanted with the team really a flat structure to work with, and for those who are thinking, does it make sense to have experience on a collective? I would say yes, it does help a lot to be involved, and it helps to understand, like, also the dynamics among different types of groups. Also examples of these collaborative initiatives that are like successful are, we find international, there is a group in South America, in Colombia, working really on just collaborative design, and the collaborative design methodology works really well for small, like cooperatives. So I will encourage you to look into the collaborative design structures for small cooperatives as a way to get inspired.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm going to move to another question, which flows from this one. Why will investing in new business structures not have the same problems as conventional business? The cycle is with vendors and customers, not just employees. Higher wages or higher prices, for example, doesn't the vicious circle remain? Is new ownership a new economy if business standards are the same? This is from guest 2 from one of our colleagues. I'll turn it first actually to Mike Tuohy because this, and it does flow from this question of cooperatives and some of these business models that we are exploring. Thank you. Mike?
Yes, thanks, Dagmar. It's definitely a multifaceted issue, and I think this question here raises the point that ownership is not a magic bullet. I think it's essential to be changing the incentives and the priorities of businesses internally, and that will have a tremendous impact in the types of decisions that get made internally to businesses. But as long as they're still competing in a global marketplace that doesn't have common standards or that encourages businesses to be making decisions that are bad for people and the environment, then those more progressive or democratic and responsible businesses are going to be at a disadvantage. So we need to be, I'd say, pushing on both sides to be creating the kinds of regulations, the frameworks for business that promote more responsible decision-making, as well as creating the types of businesses that have that responsible reflex or those morals, ethics, I'd say, built into their DNA.
Yes, thank you. That does actually, that relates very much to some of the questions that are also being raised around at what scale do these types of things happen. But let me turn it to Sean for an answer to the same question.
Yeah, so I think one of the pieces that's really important to consider with ownership and different ways of owning an enterprise is that it makes for different risks. I mean, who holds the risks, and also on the other side of it, who reaps the rewards of risks and investments when those are undertaken. Part of the problem that we have with most of the mainstream corporate for-profit economy is that you're basically having trillions, well, tens of trillions of dollars from around the world that are quickly running around trying to get returns from the same handful of investable opportunities. And they're bidding each other up, and they're creating incredible asset bubbles and other really destructive economic impacts. Even though they're changing ownership means that it's not necessarily a silver bullet cure-all, what it can do at the very least is change that risk calculus. Who is investing? Who is chasing the same return?
Thank you, Sean, for putting the point to the question of risk. Let me move it to Pallavi, if she'd like to make some comments around how this plays out in the energy field. Just a couple of short comments.
Sure. I wasn't thinking the energy field in specific, but just about more from a local perspective of doing something. What I've realized is that when you go to a community and have an energy project or any very localized project, it varies much from the community to community as people are different and understanding their needs and interests and also the assets that are in the community. So in that way, if there's a community ownership, though the business standards might still be the same, but the local nature and the very uniqueness of the community to how the business is being done. And also, as we heard from Nabil about the externalization, that I would say would probably be more internalized as communities look at more local ways of meeting their energy needs.
Great, thank you. Nabil, do you want to jump in here and tie these two things together, the cooperative questions and this one about?
Well, I mean, I could. I also know that there's a number of really interesting questions, so why don't we move on to those?
Okay, great. So let me, because we don't have, because we are starting to come to time here, I wanted to point us to Lori-Ann's question, which is how can an inclusive economy movement in Canada disrupt the status quo by better and more intentionally engaging and benefiting those at the extremes, the margins, the outliers, for example, people with disabilities, Aboriginal youth, persons in the correctional system. Even some of the programs referenced are still in the modality of planning for, as opposed to designing with individuals at the margins. I see Nabil is happy to give a comment on this, and at that point I'll seek out one more comment on this, but see it as a really ripe area where it would benefit from further exploration. Thank you. Nabil?
Yeah, absolutely. And this really comes back to one of the things that Mike Tuohy referenced in the very beginning. Who is really designing the systems that we work in? How are decisions made about the regulation of such systems? And like Vanessa said as well in the beginning, those who have vested interests in keeping the systems the way they are probably not the best ones to explore how to change those systems. So, and you know, these people who are marginalized in various ways, they bring insights that the status quo just does not have. I am not an Aboriginal youth. I cannot design a system that works to effectively engage with Aboriginal youth, just by definition. So it's really important to ensure that, we're not just hearing the voices, so to speak, but really actively engaging these people and ensuring that they are not just